So welcome back to today's lesson. So in today's lesson, we want to look at the next aspect of capital budgeting technique where we are focusing on what? The internal rate of return. Internal rate of return is a metric that we use to evaluate the profitability of the investment by calculating the discount rate that makes the net present value of the cash flows equal to what? So the underlying word here is it should be equal to 0. That's a key factor here. The internal rate of return, we find the net present value of the future cash flows, and as well, we expect that it should be equated to what? 0. So for us to find the internal rate of return being the percentage, then we are expected to what? Find it, the net present value of the future cash flows of the investment compared with the initial cash flow, and then we equate that to 0 so that we can find what? The rate. Okay, so when it comes to the internal rate of return, to accept a project under internal rate of return, we are saying that it should have what? A higher internal rate of return being the percentage. So we are saying that in a higher internal rate of return indicates a more profitable what? Investment, whilst a lower one may indicate what? A less attractive what? Opportunity. So that means that to accept a project under internal rate of return as a capital budgeting technique, then it means that we are going to accept where the internal rate of return in terms of percentage is greater than the risk associated with the investment, being the hurdle rate or the rate of return given as per the investment. Okay, so to add more spice to the discussion, internal rate of return, as you can also see here, is the same thing, the discount rate that makes what the present value of the cash flow equals the present what value of the cash outflow, the same thing. As we said, to find the rate, then we can straight up say that here the internal rate of return per the formula, our internal rate of return should be equal to what? 0, and that means you should have what? The summation of what? The future cash flows of the investment divided by what? 1 plus x all to the power n minus what? The initial cash flow. So here the x here represents what? The rate. That's the internal rate of return that we ought to find generally at the end of the day. So let's take note of that. So you find what? The present value of what? These future cash flows based on the period, and then we can then naturally take it from there. So let's take a question two. Explain the internal rate of return that we are discussing here. So if you remember, if you avoided part one of our discussion on capital budgeting, realize that we use the same question for the net present value. So we are going to use to also to calculate for the internal rate of return. So this is our question. Malizi is deciding whether to invest in a retail business. The relevant cash flows are expected to be as follows. So we have year 0, which is the initial investment or the initial cash flow, which is 100,000. We have the yearly inflows, year 1, year 2, up to year 5. And then we have the cost of capital, which is the rate or the hurdle rate to be equal to 10%. To be equal to 10%. So we are asked to determine whether the project should be accepted or rejected using the following method. So if you have read the part, once I said we have already discussed the net present value, and that link will be provided in the description of this video so that you can watch that on the net present value. So we are going to look at what? The internal rate of return as a technique, whether to accept this project or not. And the base rule here is that we accept an investment if the internal rate of return in percentage is greater than what? The hurdle rate or the rate of return. Rate of return, all right, which is what? The cost of capital, all right? But we reject it where the internal rate of return is less than what? The rate of return or the hurdle rate or the cost of capital. So that is the base rule. So how do we go? So let's bring in our smart calculator to help us to calculate the internal rate of return as per this question. So as per the formula that we look at it here as a way to calculate the internal rate of return that you can see here, We're going to follow the same rule to actually find the internal rate of return as per Mami Lizzie investment that you want to undertake generally here. So when calculating internal rate of return using our smart calculator here, we have what? Open bracket. Then we have the first cash flow for year one, which is 20,000 divided by what? Into bracket 1 plus alpha x. Then we add a percentage to it. Because remember, this is what? A percentage issue. So we just want to bring the percentage to attach to the x being the internal rate of return. Then we have what? Plus. Then we continue with the next cash, which is 60,000. Okay. 60,000 divided by 1 plus what? Alpha x. Then add a percentage to it. So remember, this is what? For year 2. So we add that one. So here was year 1. So adding that to it. Then we have plus. Then go forward. Year 3, for which we know is what? 30,000. So we have in what? 30,000 divided by, so the same thing, 1 plus alpha x. Then we add our percentage to it. Then to the power 3 plus. Then we have here, so what? The next, in the 4th year, we have what? 15,000 divided by 1 plus alpha x with a percentage attached to it. Then we have to the power what? 4. Then lastly, we have in what? That of what? 10,000 coming up. Okay. Then divided by into bracket 1 plus alpha x, we attach percentage to it. Then to the power what? To the power 5. Then we have in what? Our bracket close. Okay. Then we compare that to the initial cash flow, which is what? 100,000. Okay. So 100,000. And then we equate that to what? 0. We equate that to 0. And let's see what we are getting. So being the result that we are having here, you see what we are having generally up here. So you realize that we are having a number of x's here, but we are interested in a positive value of x. All right, so here we are going to go for what? The last x value here, which is what? X equal to 13.05. So that means that our internal rate of return per this project, our internal rate of return per this project is equal to what? 13.05%. 13.05%. So this means that this project must be what? Accepted, since the internal rate of return is greater than the cost of capital or the hurdle rate of what? 10%. So we'll accept this project. So this is how we calculate what the internal rate of return using the capital budgeting technique to appraise an investment. So thank you for watching. The video was really helpful to you. Do what? Like, comment, and for the most important part, subscribe to the channel so that once we release any content, you'll be the best person to get it right away. So I'll see you in the next session where we discuss the discounted payback period. Bye bye.